Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Brockopp side. And, yeah, would you look at that? 2019 is nearly over, and, well, now pretty much every major release of the year is finally out, so that means it's time to talk about my top 10 favorite movies of 2019. And you can see I got all snazzed up with my hand-me-down blazer because, well, it's a special occasion. It's the end of the year, time to wrap up all the movies we've seen and, categorize them and stuff. And before we go any further, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you live talking by movies. Now, just a quick disclaimer, this is my personal top 10 favorite movies of the year, not necessarily what I think might be the greatest movies, just in a general sense, so chances are my list and your list are not gonna fully intertwine with each other, but that's okay. If you want to agree or disagree with me, then type out in the comments down below. And also, just want to say this right now, I unfortunately have not seen every single major release this year that I wanted to. I have still yet to see The Lighthouse, Parasite, or Uncut Gems. Lighthouse and Parasite, I unfortunately couldn't see them in the theater when they were in the theater, and Uncut Gems, I do plan to see it as soon as humanly possible. So, anyway, with that out of the way, let's get into it. So first we'll begin with a couple of quick honorable mentions, and those honorable mentions are Spider-Man Far From Home, Shazam! Booksmart, and John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum. These four movies I've enjoyed immensely, but Far From Home and Shazam I did not put on my top 10 list just because I didn't want like 33% of this list to be comic book movies. I wanted to make sure there was a decent balance between, different genres, so it wasn't all just superhero stuff and a couple of serious ones here and there. Booksmart, I did like that one, but I think I need to see it a couple more times to appreciate it a little bit more. And John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum is just a great kick-ass Keanu Reeves action movie. But the problem is there are 10 other movies this year that I really liked, and those made the list. So, let's start with number 10. At number 10, we've got They Shall Not Grow Old. This was a Peter Jackson directed World War I documentary where they took this old black and white footage of World War I, colorized it, digitized it, added in some sound effects and dialogue, and then on top of all of that, released it in 3D. This film came out really early in the year, like January or February, so if you didn't see it, there might be a good reason for that. But when I saw this film, I was really blown away by it. It is the most immersive war film documentary, anything that I've ever seen. It's the most effective use of 3D I've ever seen in a 3D movie because it's not just there to be like, whoa, 3D and all that goodness. It actually puts you right there on these battlefields with these soldiers, experiencing just the hardships of the war itself. And it also just feels like there's actual dimension to it because, the characters are in like one layer, the foreground's in another, the background's in another. So it just feels like you're really sucked right into this movie. And it's also just a really creative use of old-time war footage and brought it almost like you filmed it today, because Peter Jackson's argument was, well, they only used black and white footage back in the day because that was all that was available, so it was like, I think if the directors were given either the option of black and white film or color film, like which one do you want, they would have gone with the color because, well, it is real-time war footage, so you'd want to get in the best quality as possible. And, there are a couple little moments here and there where, some of the digitization and, like, some of the grain on the characters feels like just a little wonky at times, but for the most part, I really enjoyed this movie. It'd be higher up on the list, but there's also 9 more really good films. And also, I do want to get the Blu-ray of this at some point, but I do kind of fear that it's not going to be the same experience watching it at home as it was in the theater, but still, I had a really good time with this movie. So coming at number 9, we've got Marriage Story, this very well-made film about these two people going through divorce and all the trials and tribulations that one might deal with when going through a divorce. And what makes this movie so good are the performances by Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson. You could very much believe that these were two people that at one point did love each other, got married, and as time just started to go on, their two careers were taking different directions. They started to see a lot of red flags that were present at the very beginning, but they didn't notice beforehand, and you really just see how their relationship with each other just starts to go right down into turmoil, especially towards the end of the film, and then it just kind of starts to build back up a little bit by the very end of it. It's just a very well-executed film. The performances are great, and, it's not something I've personally experienced. My parents never went through a divorce, but still, I really like this movie. I was very invested in it. And yeah, that's why it's number 9. And then number 8, we've got Us, Jordan Peele's second directorial effort. Now, this movie was a little divisive when it first came out. You know, some loved it, some were kind of mixed about it, some straight up did not like it. I'm very much on the side of loving it. You know, it's got a lot of the same elements that made his first film, Get Out, so good. You know, a good blend of humor into these dark and scary moments. You got some fantastic performances, some really interesting world building in there, and it's just a very intriguing movie from beginning to end. And like I said before a few months ago with my Blu-ray review for Us, I did mention that even if maybe you weren't the biggest fan of this movie, I think still this movie Us is a very important film because not only is it an original horror film, it's an original film that was highly successful and is showing Hollywood that, hey, audiences are ready to see more original ideas like this as long as you make them really, really good like you did here. So I think this is just going to open up the floodgates to give us more original films, you know, give us some new ideas, give us some new visions, new directors, new actors, things like that. So again, if you like this movie, fantastic. And if you didn't like this film, that's okay, but I really hope you can at least understand how important a movie like this is in the year 2019. So then, coming at number 7, we've got Knives Out, directed by Rian Johnson. Now, I love myself a good murder mystery story. You know, movies like Clue the movie and other ones like that. It's just really fun to see a detective try to figure out who murdered this famous person in this really cool old-fashioned mansion. This cast is absolutely stellar, especially Daniel Craig as a private investigator. You know, at some point in the movie you think, okay, I kinda got this figured out, this is where they're going with it, why would they reveal this here? But then everything starts to come together at the very end like a natural detective story like this would, and you're like, oh shit, I did not quite see that coming. There's some really good callbacks to certain character moments here and there, and overall, this was just a really entertaining murder mystery. Getting one of these cool detective murder mystery type films once in a while is a really cool treat, and well, this movie proves that. So, coming at number 6, we've got Ready or Not, which was definitely a real end of summer surprise. It's kinda similar to Knives Out in some ways, mostly because it takes place in a really old mansion with this very screwed up family that's part of some sort of empire, whether it be murder mystery novels or board games. But this movie is not a murder mystery, it's a survive the night kind of film, with Samara Weaving as a very strong and likable female character trying not to get killed by all these crazy family members that are under a curse. It's got a lot of humor, but a lot of dark humor at the same time. It's wonderfully violent. It's really well paced. This movie was an absolute blast to see in the theater, and I really hope we get to see more Samara Weaving in future movies because this movie proves what she can do, and not to mention she has probably one of the best ending lines of dialogue in any movie this year. So, topping off the top 5, we've got Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino's 9th film, and I really like this movie because I've always had kind of a fascination with old-style Hollywood, you know, the 50s, 60s era, like where this movie takes place, so that instantly got me hooked on it, but it's really the performances in this movie that really kept me invested throughout the whole 2 hours and 45 minutes. Leonardo DiCaprio, Brad Pitt, Margot Robbie, and it's just fun to see Quentin Tarantino once again pay tribute to something that he grew up with, something that, you know, he's very passionate about, and you definitely see that through every frame in this movie, and seeing more of his fun, alternate take on history, you know, with Charles Manson and certain things happen in the Hollywood Hills. It's just a really well-made movie. A lot of people said that the pacing was really off and it was way too long, which I do understand where people are coming from there, but honestly, I was hooked throughout pretty much the whole thing. Whenever Quentin Tarantino makes a new movie, it's bound to be a really good time, and well, this movie was definitely no exception. At number 4, we've got El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie. Now, this was the conclusion to Breaking Bad that most fans, I don't think, truly realized they needed until they got it, because the ending of Breaking Bad showed Walter White killing the neo-Nazis, freeing Jesse, and then ultimately dying at the very end. But then this movie's like, hey, wait a minute, what happened to Jesse? You know, what the hell did he do after he got freed? Which, of course, you'll probably assume that, you know, he changed his identity and moved away. But this movie explores what it took for Jesse to get to that point, and also the effects of being captured by these neo-Nazis and forced to cook meth as their slave/prisoner. And Aaron Paul gives a great performance once again, Jesse Pinkman. He carries the entire movie. It's basically just like a 2-hour Breaking Bad episode, but I think that's kind of all it needed to be. You know, you got some great flashback moments with a cameo from Bryan Cranston as Walter White, which was fantastic, and ultimately it wraps up the story for the other main character of Breaking Bad in a satisfying way, so now we know that at least Jesse made it out okay, and I had a really good time with this movie, so at number 4 it is. Coming at number 3 is Joker, directed by Todd Phillips. Now, it's definitely an understatement to say this movie was wildly successful, grossing over $1 billion at the box office, minus China, which is a really big deal, and is now the most successful R-rated comic book movie, but also most successful R-rated movie, period, of all time. You know, this movie gives us a really dark and realistic take on the most popular DC supervillain of all time, arguably the most popular supervillain ever. Joaquin Phoenix is a fantastic performance, and we get to see him go from this, you know, guy who's been beaten up by society to this maniacal clown that, you know, goes and kills a guy on a TV show and sparks some sort of crazy clown movement. And what I really like about this movie is how it's not just a linear point A to point B story. You know, there are a few times throughout it where it starts to make you second guess what exactly is actually happening. Is any of this true? Is it all just in his head? What exactly is going on here, which I really like, because that's kind of how the Joker's backstory is supposed to be. This movie also was accompanied by a fantastic soundtrack, you know, with those strings when the Joker's, you know, doing his slow dances in the bathroom and things like that. It just really sucks you right into the world of this movie and shows that comic book films, you know, similar to movies like Logan and the Dark Knight trilogy, where it's not all just big CGI explosions and stuff like that. You can have these very grounded and dark character pieces just happen to feature these comic book movies. So I think we're gonna get more comic book films like this down the road, which would be pretty cool. But let's not forget, we also do need our fun, explosive escapism comic book movies now and again, but still, this movie was great. And then coming at number 2, we've got Toy Story 4, directed by Josh Cooley. Similar to El Camino, this was the finale that fans didn't realize they needed or wanted until they got it, because Toy Story 3 ended the series on such a high note with Andy passing on the toys to Bonnie, and we're like, okay, the toys have a new home, they're gonna be okay. But then this movie comes in and is like, hey, what about Woody? I mean, he was the closest to Andy than any of the other toys. Is he gonna be the same thing with Bonnie? Is he gonna be fully moved on from Andy? And this movie comes in and says, no, he's not. And then we get to see him reunite with Bo Peep, which was just beautiful. And it closes out Woody's story arc that's been going on since the very first movie in a very satisfying and emotional way. I have loved Toy Story my entire life, and I was definitely one of the people that was on the fence about this movie coming into it, but this movie definitely justified its existence, and I think it did a fantastic job and gave us some great new characters like Forky, Ducky and Bunny, Duke Kaboom. So overall, second favorite movie of the year. But yeah. What's number 1, you may ask? Well, congratulations. I'm gonna tell you. And coming in at number 1, we've got Avengers Endgame, directed by Joe and Anthony Russo. Now, this movie was a true event. It wasn't just a movie, it was a straight-up event. It was the culmination of 11 years worth of MCU movies. Not only did this movie give us several satisfying conclusions to several major MCU characters we've had since the very first Avengers movie, but it also resolved the biggest threat in the entire Marvel Universe up to this point with Thanos. It gave us so many moments that fans themselves have just been wanting to see. I mean, that portal scene at the final battle, it just gave me chills every time I watched it, and this movie by far was the greatest theater experience I had all year. Every time I went to this movie, whether it be opening night, a week later, a couple weeks later with only a few people, there were always big cheering reactions, like when Cap lifted Mjolnir, everybody applauded, and when all the heroes came together at the very end, it was just a really great time to be a Marvel fan, just to see this entire epic Infinity Saga come together, give us a satisfying conclusion, open up the doors for a new future with the Marvel characters, and overall this movie has insane rewatch value as well. I've rewatched in whole several times since the Blu-ray came out, and there's sometimes where I'll go on Disney Plus to rewatch certain clips here and there, so that's why Avengers Endgame is my number 1. So, that's my top 10 favorite movies for 2019, and again, probably my list is quite different from your list, and that's okay. If you have anything you want to talk about, agree with, disagree with, whatever, then talk about it down below, and if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button if you live talking by movies. But anyway, so, now that 2019 is over, tell me what movies you're looking forward to in 2020, and we'll see you on the Brockopp side.